All right, hello, welcome back to A Software Engineer Plays, where we're doing something a little bit different. Figured I'd get a little bit more into more educational kind of realm. We're not playing a game today, but I'm going to be playing around in Microsoft Excel, which is one of my personal favorite pieces of software. I do a lot of work in Excel professionally, both in terms of analyzing data through formulas and also writing code to automate a lot of tasks. For those of you that don't know, a Microsoft Excel has an entire accessible IDE, which is an integrated development environment, which lets you write code and control just about everything in Excel. So I thought it would be fun to kind of use Excel as a sort of a medium to teach and go over some programming concepts. So if you want to follow along, Excel is actually a pretty great tool for beginner programmers because you don't need any special software or anything. If you've got Microsoft Office, then you've got a fully fledged IDE and the ability to write code and see it happen right in front of you. You don't have to worry about setting up any compilers or any of that kind of stuff. You write code and then you can execute it and see what you've written happen right in front of you in the workbook, which is actually a lot of fun. So first steps, we need to get Excel set up to let you write code. So to do this, what you need to do is right-click anywhere in the top section up here and hit Customize the ribbon. And there'll be a checkbox here in the right-hand bar to enable developer options. And we want to do that, so we'll enable developer options. Now you get a brand new tab up here called Developer. And this is where the magic starts to happen. So the most important button for writing code in Excel is the Visual Basic button here. So Excel automation is written in a subset of Visual Basic called Visual Basic for Applications, or VBA, Visual Basic for Applications, which is based on a rather old, admittedly old version of Visual Basic, VB6, I believe. But this is kind of the home where you'll be writing all of your code. I think ideally what I want to do in this series is make a lot of games that rely on a 2D grid. So I mean, Excel obviously works in a 2D grid, so it makes sense to use it as a game board, sort of a top-down view of a game board. So I was thinking for starters, like tic-tac-toe might be fun. And then we could get into sort of more advanced 2D games if this series is interesting to anyone. So let's go over a couple of basics in this video, though, just sort of to get situated, figure things out, because when you open up your IDE, you're just met with kind of a blank gray screen and a bunch of buttons, and who knows what that's all about. So for starters, in the IDE window, you've got a couple of really important windows to get familiar with. You have your Project Explorer, the Immediate window. This is where debug messages and other things will pop up when you're writing your code. Also, you can use it to check values of things or do quick calculations. Like if you want to know what the absolute value of -4 was, it'll tell you that it's 4. So the immediate window, you can execute single commands immediately or check the value of things. I don't want to get too in depth because we haven't even talked about variables and objects yet, but the immediate window is where we'll see a lot of debug output, and it's very useful. Then you get the properties window, and this will change depending on which object you have selected in the project browser. So we've got sheet 1 selected, which is the same sheet here. So we'll see the name is sheet 1. If I update this to call it homepage, we'll see that the name of the object has changed, but it's still called sheet1 down here. And you can see it's labeled there as sheet1. So if I update this by renaming it here, you'll see that that name there has changed as well. So this is the name of the sheet in terms of code, whereas what's in parentheses here is the name of the sheet in Excel. So a little bit of a disconnect there, but then you get all of these options that relate to the sheet itself, which we don't really care about, but when you're doing Excel automation working with actual data, being able to trigger some of these values, auto filtering calculations is very useful. But moving on, the watch window. When we talk about variables and objects, the watch window will become very useful to us. Basically what this lets us do is keep an eye on the value of different variables as we're stepping through the code. And then we've got the locals window, which will show you what variables you have available in the given scope of the program. We'll talk about program scope in a little bit, but just know that it is a thing, and the locals window will show you all the variables that you have access to. Anyway, those are the 5 main sub-panels. Then you've got all of the controls up at the top, the most important ones being the run button, pause, and reset. And if you add your debug panel as well, you get the options to step into, step over, and step out, which are very useful. Lets you execute code line by line, but let me just add my debug panel here. And the edit panel is also helpful for making sure that your code is readable. So, okay, we've got our IDE set up now. Everything is beautiful. Let's go ahead and write the classic program that everyone starts with called Hello World. So we're going to create a sheet here. We'll call it Hello World. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a module. And what we do to do that is we right click in the project window and go to Insert and select Module. And that will then open up a module. So I like to rename my modules to be clear. So I'm going to call this one Hello World. And now it's a blank canvas. And there are a couple things we should do that I think are good practice at this point. The first and most important one is to declare option explicit at the top of the code. And what this does is it basically means that you have to declare all of your variables, otherwise it will not work. So you have to manually declare variables with option explicit set. And the reason I do that is I've seen it time and time again in my professional life where option explicit isn't set, and then someone will make a typo as they're working with a variable. And if you don't have option explicit set, Visual Basic will just create the variable as soon as it sees it. So if you get a typo, there'll be a brand new variable of that typo name, and let me tell you, hours of debugging spent just looking for a typo. Anyway, so we'll get a little bit more into the difference between subroutines and functions later on, but for the sake of this video, we're going to create a subroutine, and we're going to call it, first of all, we need to say that it's a public subroutine. So public means that it's accessible by all parts of the program. Sub is the keyword to say that we are declaring a subroutine. And then we need to give our subroutine a name. So I'm going to call it Hello World. And then we put open parentheses and close parentheses. And you'll see that the IDE has added our end keywords for us there, so we don't need to worry about those. So there are a couple of ways that we can implement our Hello World. We'll start by using the immediate window that we talked about earlier. So to access the immediate window, we use the keyword debug and then print. And we'll use double quotes here to tell it that we're printing out a string of characters. And those will be hello world. So if I run this now, I'm going to run it by hitting the play button or F5 on my keyboard. You'll see that hello world is printed to the immediate window. Also, another important button to know is if you're inside a subroutine and you press F8, it'll start stepping through individual lines by lines. And you'll see we get the yellow arrow to say which line it's about to execute. And if I press F8 again, jumps down to the next line and it's printed out hello world there. So F5 and F8, very useful keys to step through the program and see what's happening. So that is, at its simplest, a hello world program. But I mentioned at the top of the video that you can see things happen in the workbook as you're writing code, which is really cool. So let's go ahead and let's make cell A1 here. Let's make it say hello world as well. Now there are a couple of ways that we can access the workbook here. First of all, we need to tell the code that we want to access this specific workbook. And to do that, there's a keyword called this workbook. And if we put a period after that, we'll be able to access all of these different methods and properties of this workbook. But we want to access the hello world worksheet. So you'll see there's a worksheets member here. And we want to access the hello world worksheet. So we can either supply it an index, a number, so it would be sheet number 2 in this case, or if you want to be a little bit more explicit, you can give it the name of the sheet as a string. So this is now telling the code that we want to reference the workbook that we're currently writing the code in, this workbook, and the worksheet called hello world. So now it knows that we're looking at a worksheet, so we can put a period in, and we can access either a range by name, A1, so this will update the value of this range to be hello world. You can see there. There are another different couple of ways that we can access the workbook itself. Instead of using the range object, there's the cells, which lets you give it a row and a column. So let's do row 2, column 1. So different ways, depending on how you're writing the code. I prefer to use cells, honestly, because the code more often than not is using numbers to index the workbook, but that's one way we can do that. Another very useful thing to do, especially if you're writing long blocks of code referencing the same object, in this case the hello world worksheet object, is using this with keyword. So one of my least favorite parts of writing VBA is that it is very zealous about giving you compile errors. So if you're in the middle of writing a line of code and you want to copy and paste something from another line, it will complain at you. But what you can do is, using this with statement, is tell it basically everything that's going to be within this with statement until with end with. Basically, just put this in front of it. So if I wanted to do those 2 lines above, I could just say I'm going to put exclamation marks on these so you can see them happening. So basically, this is like saying, okay, VBA, take this whole line and paste it in front of these, and it will execute them just like that. So we'll step through, and now you'll see we're putting exclamation marks on. So that saves a lot of typing, a lot of copying and pasting, and it's easier to read as well, which is a big part of programming. All right, and lastly, a useful way to show things to the user is with what we call message boxes, and VBA provides one of those just with the message box, MSG box function. So you'll see once you put in the keyword, it gives you all of the arguments or parameters that you can pass to it. So the prompt is what is displayed in the message box. Then you can have a whole bunch of different kinds of buttons. So let's say OK only, the title of the window. There. And then, so anything in square brackets you see here is an optional parameter, so you do not have to provide these. But if you do, it will make use of them. Another thing you may be noticing is that in VBA, if you're not doing an assignment, you do not need parentheses around your functions. So just as an example of that, this line will run. If I put parentheses around it, it may run, but you'll see it'll give me this error here. Because I put parentheses in, it's expecting to be setting the value of this function equal to a variable. And because I didn't declare a variable, it's complaining about that. So that's something to look out for. Just to show you, if I create a variable using the, and I'm getting ahead of myself, I realize that, but we'll get more in depth later on, trust me. I will declare a variable called result. I'm going to make it a variant type, and I will then say result equals message box what. So in this case, I'm not going to set the buttons, I'm not going to set the title, I'm just going to have the message box ask what my name is. And so let's go ahead and step through all this. We get the debug printout, we set those, set them to have exclamation marks, and now here's our message box, hello world. Hi, there is the title. Only an OK button. Now because we've got this result button, you'll see if you hover over it, you'll see the value of it is currently empty, which also matches the scope in the locals window here. And to show you what the watches window does, if you right-click any variable and click Add Watch, you will get the same printout as the locals window. And that's really useful when you're in a lot more complicated subroutines and you want to see the value of different variables. But if I execute this button and click OK, you'll see the value of result is 1, and that is because the message box function returns a value depending on which button is clicked. So in this case, clicking on OK returns a value of 1. So that is at its core a basic Hello World program. As the last thing to do, using our new Shiny Developer tab up at the top, I'm going to show you how to run code from the workbook itself. And to do that, we're going to insert a button, and we're going to assign it to the subroutine that we wrote. So to do that again, we went to Insert, we selected a button, and we dragged it onto the window here. And then since we've already got a public subroutine declared, you can just select it from the list and hit OK. So we'll delete that. And if you right-click on the button, you'll be able to select it and move it, and also click inside it to edit the title. I'll call it Say Hello. And now, because we've linked that up with our Hello World subroutine, every time I click this, it will execute the code and show our pop-ups. So, as the last thing, because it can be useful, also since it's asking us what our name is, I'm going to change this to be an input box. And an input box will let us put in our name, and then basically this, what I just did is, we'll see when we get to this line, it's going to ask for our name and give us a box to input text, and then we've told it to say hi to our name. So maybe getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but it'll show us some of the cool things that you can be done. So what is my name? My name is a software engineer plays. And now if I click OK, it'll take that and it'll print it out because we told it to say hi, and ampersand here is the concatenation operator, means basically smush the two strings together. So, hi, a software engineer plays. And that is multiple ways to do a hello world program in Excel. What we're going to start doing from here on out as we continue this series is work on creating a tic-tac-toe to start with, because that's going to get into a lot of conditional logic, as well as kind of, dealing with states and checking to see whether a player has won. We might write a very simple AI to play against a human. We'll have a single player mode and also a two-player mode, because it's kind of a fun way to learn a lot of the basics, and a lot of people have access to Microsoft Excel. So that's the plan. We're at a pretty good stopping point here, pretty easily digestible little nugget of getting everything set up and writing a little bit of basic code. And I will call it there and say thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this content and find it useful, please drop a like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, and we'll be back for more Excel and also educational video game content in the near future. Thanks, have a great day, bye.